How's it going, guys? Randall, aka Shizukatz here once again on the Tressa's Collectibles channel, and today I'm going to be profiling one of my personal favorite decks to pilot, 8 Choice Data Live, featuring many new cards from the Data Bullet Extra Booster. The central theme of many new Kurumi cards from the EB is the manipulation of cards and clock, which is amazing flavor considering Kurumi's association with clocks and time. You can move cards in and out of clock using it as a toolbox, reorder the cards in clock to get specific ones on top in order to activate their alarm effects, and much more. The ability to utilize the clock mechanics in unique and creative ways is what makes the deck have one of the highest skill ceilings of all the decks in Weiss Schwarz, in my opinion. However, this also makes playing the deck feel extremely rewarding if piloted correctly. Due to the complex nature of this deck, I'll be going more in depth on the intricacies of this deck compared to some of our other deck profiles. As always, let's begin with the Climax Combos. The level 1 Kotori from the original Data Live set sits at 4000 base, gaining an additional 1500 power during your turn if you have another Date or Celestial Spirit character. Her Climax combo is very powerful. On attack, reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a Date or Celestial Spirit character or an event, add it to hand and then repeat the effect a second time. A single copy of Kotori can net you up to 2 cards, and since it grabs events, the only way to miss the combo is by revealing a Climax. However, since we're running 8 choice climaxes for our lineup, even revealing a climax will result in a +1. This means that an attack with the Kotori combo will always yield at least 1 card, and at most 3, if you get 2 top check adds and then reveal a climax for the trigger. Our level 3 combo is Zafkiel Kurumi. At the start of the Encore step during the turn she's placed on stage from hand, you heal 1. Unlike conventional healers that heal immediately upon being placed, this heal is delayed so that it doesn't disturb your clock in case you want to keep cards there to use for alarms or for her Climax combo. The combo itself is actually an incorrect translation pending an errata from Bushiroad. The actual effect is as follows. When this card attacks, if Zafkiel is in your Climax area, choose one of your characters this turn, that character gets plus 1000 power, and this card gets the following ability until end of turn. At the end of this card's attack, you may pay cost, which is pay 2, discard 1 card. Choose 1 card from your clock and deal X damage to your opponent, where X equals the level of the chosen card plus 1. The incorrect version of the effect would allow you to put the ability to burn on other characters, which means that you could save all the burns for your last attack of the turn. The correct version has Kurumi only able to put the ability on herself, but the 1000 power can still go anywhere. This card is a powerful finisher due to its ability to burn for variable amounts of damage. It can deal anywhere from 1 to 4, depending on what you have in clock and how much damage you're trying to deal, based on how much damage your opponent is currently at. However, because the damage is based on cards in clock, you might not have the correct levels available to deal certain amounts of damage, but we have other cards in our deck that can fix that problem quite handily. Also worth mentioning is that because the burn happens at the end of Kurumi's attack, if you're able to remove her from the board entirely, for example with a memory kick counter, she will not be able to use the burn combo, nor will she be able to heal at the start of the Encore step, so you really need to watch out for things like that. Before moving on to the deck list, I also want to talk about our Backrow setup for this deck. In this deck, we want to have specific characters in our back row as often as possible, as they are the key part of this deck's strategy and identity. First, let's take a look at this 1-0 Kurumi, one of the many new cards from Data Bullet. Apart from being a Global 500 support, she is the key utility piece for this deck due to her Resonance ability. By resting herself and revealing the level 3 Kurumi combo in hand, choose any card from clock, even an event or climax, add it to hand, and then put any card from hand on top of your clock. This accomplishes multiple things at once. It lets you toolbox your clock for free, act as a pseudo discard outlet, and even sets up alarms. Additionally, on play, you can pay 1 and clock the top card of your deck to search for the level 3 Kurumi, easily enabling the Resonance ability. Kurumi's free toolboxing is extremely valuable given the Kotori combo's randomness. Even though we're getting a lot of cards through the combo, they are ultimately just random stuff off the top, so Kurumi lets us swap them out for more important cards. Also, she even has a soul trigger, allowing her to be picked up off of choice triggers. You usually won't need more than 1 copy for most games, which means that the second and third copies can be sent to stock when you trigger choice climaxes, after you've secured your first one. The 1-0 Kurumi is strong on its own, but her potential really skyrockets when you introduce our other 2 back row mainstays, the level 0 Kurumi from the original Data Live set, and the new 2-1 support. First, let's take a look at the level 0. She's another Global 500 support, and has 2 act abilities, both of which require resting her as cost. The first ability lets you choose 2 characters from clock and send them to memory until the end of the turn, at which point they come back on the bottom of the clock. This can be used for rearranging cards in clock so that an alarm ends up being on top. However, the second ability is the true star of the show, allowing us to take 2 characters from our waiting room and put them on the bottom of our clock until the end of the turn, at which point the bottom 2 cards of our clock fall back into waiting room. The 2/1 assist has a similar ability, resting herself to put a character from waiting room on either top or bottom of the clock until the end of the turn, at which point the bottom card falls off. These abilities can be used to load up cards in clock that you want to grab off of the 1/0's resonance ability, which essentially means you have access to any character in your waiting room and at no stock cost. Once you hit level 1, you will probably be using this pair of abilities every single turn to toolbox for whatever you need. While at level 1, you will want to be using the 0/0 and 1/0 as your back row for access to the utility combination and 1k global power. And then once you hit level 2, you'll want to promote the 0/0 to the front row and replace it with the 2/1 assist to bolster your early play game at level 2. Also, for one final note, while these abilities are very useful, you will need to keep watch of how many cards you have in clock, as well as your deck if you want to use these optimally. If you have 5 cards in clock, you can't use the effect of the 0/0 to add 2 cards to clock, as it will cause you to level up, and you will not only have no cards in clock, but you will have dealt 2 damage to yourself for free, and you won't heal 2 at the end of the turn. This gets even worse if you're low on deck and are about to refresh, since it means that you can't even use the effect while you have 4 cards in clock, as the 2 extra cards plus refresh point will cause you to level up. This isn't as bad with the 2/1 assist, as it only adds 1 card to clock, but is still something that you should keep in the back of your mind when going for plays with this deck. Now, taking a look at the deck in its entirety, we have 15 level 0s, 13 level 1s, 5 level 2s, and 9 level 3s. The 0 line is on the lower side compared to many of the other decks we've shown on the channel, and this is mainly because the cards in the higher levels are more important at higher counts, and thus we felt deserved more slots. As far as colors go, this is a mono yellow deck with only a few green level 0s for utility, so you don't have to worry about color. Starting off with our 0 line, you might notice that the deck is mostly utility cards at 0. Typically, we would want to start our 0 line with a plussing profile for the early game, such as a chaser, runner, or beater. However, due to low space for level 0s, combined with the high amount of card advantage that can be generated with the Kotori combo at level 1, I chose to prioritize utility in this list. That being said, we still run 4 copies of the Kurumi Riki as a way to set up our level 1 game. She's unique among Rikis in that she doesn't put the top card of deck into clock, and instead you get to choose a character from waiting room to put onto the bottom of your clock, which can synergize well with the 1/0 Kurumi back row. Usually, you'd like to search for a level 1 Kotori combo with this, but don't be afraid to pick up something else, like back row utility. Remember, even a single copy of the Kotori combo can result in a lot of advantage, so going for 2 is sometimes unnecessary and can result in going overhand, and going for 3 is honestly way overkill. I'll talk about the next 2 cards at the same time as they basically fulfill the same role. The 4 copies of Sawa and 1 copy of Shido offer the deck main phase mill and stock outlet in lieu of brainstorms, which you've probably noticed we do not run any copies of. This goes back to the Kotori argument in that Kotori can generate so much advantage that we don't rely on brainstorms to get cards in this deck, and we instead want to prioritize the specific Backrow setup that we talked about earlier. Sawa's ability can be used if you have 2 or less memory. Pay 1, look at up to 3 cards from the top of the deck, choose up to 1 Date or Celestial Spirit character from among them, add it to hand, send the rest to waiting room, and then she sends herself to memory. Shido is basically the same card, except he sacks himself instead of sending himself to memory, and allows you to look at up to 4 cards. Additionally, he has on-play Blink, allowing you to shut down certain abilities on your opponent's board, such as cross-turn power, minus soul effects, or even just getting rid of markers. I run a 4-1 ratio of these cards with priority on the Sawas for the extra memory compression, and 1 copy of Shido for the Blink tech. Next, we have 2 copies of this Kurumi. On attack, she can give 1500 power to any of your Date or Celestial Spirit characters, but the more interesting ability is her Alarm. If she's on top of clock at the start of the opponent's attack phase, all of your characters gain an ability until the end of the turn. When they are front attacked, you can discard any card to give that character plus 2000 power until end of turn. Basically, having this on top of clock at the start of the opponent's attack phase turns your entire hand into 2k counters unless you potentially defend your entire board. This is especially useful at level 2, where you start playing for the board with your powerful early play plus support setup, and you can use this effect to defend them. Our last level 0 is the one of Climax Swapper Origami from the original Data Live set. In addition to her Climax Swap ability, when she's placed on stage from hand, you may reveal your entire hand to your opponent, and if there's a Climax in hand, all of your opponent's front row characters get minus 500 power for the turn. The main appeal to this, for me, is to debuff the opponent's board at level 3. As I mentioned earlier, Kurumi Finisher is susceptible to getting memory kicked via a memory counter, so even a 500 power reduction can make the difference between a win and a loss. There is a new Kurumi Climax Swapper introduced in Data Bullet that has 2500 power and no secondary ability, but I think that the minus 500 power ability is relevant enough to warrant a spot in my deck instead. We already went over most of the level 1s in this deck, but we still have another very important level 1 to talk about, which is this 1-0 Kurumi, also from Data Bullet. She can sack herself to give any of your characters 2000 power until end of turn, and she has an on-death Komi ability. When sent from stage to waiting room, even by her first effect, she lets us dig through the top 4 cards of our deck to try to find a yellow Climax and add it to hand. If we added one, we discard a card. At its worst, this card lets us mill up to 4 cards for free, which is already an excellent floor. Using her sack ability for the plus 2k power is a minus 1 in card advantage, but you also have to take Kotori combo into consideration. Kotori is a plus 2 if both of the top check adds hit, and Kurumi is actively allowing us to dig for the Climax in order to use that combo. The sack ability is also a very useful late game consideration. By buffing the 3-2 Kurumi combo, you can put her out of range of your opponent's memory kick counters, and allowing her combo to go off without any problems. The last level 1 in our deck is My Little Shido, an extremely powerful and versatile event card from the original Data Live set. To play it, you must rest one Date or Celestial Spirit character, then choose one of 3 effects. You can either look it up to 4 from the top of the deck and choose up to 1 Date or Celestial Spirit character from among them, add it to hand and send the rest to waiting room. Choose one of your opponent's characters and force your opponent to swap it with a lower level character in their waiting room, which is often referred to as shrinking a character. Or, if your hand has 6 or less cards, you can salvage any level 3 character from waiting room. The fact that this event costs 0 stock is actually kind of ridiculous, as the utility it offers between its 3 options is extremely powerful. Now you might be wondering, don't you have to rest a character to use this? What if we want to rest both our back row to do clock shenanigans? That's where the level 0 Sawa and Shido come into play. You can put them on stage, rest them for the My Little Shido event, and then use their own ability, sacking them to either memory or waiting room to go through the deck and dig for more useful characters. At level 2, we have our 2 copies of the 2-1 assist and 3 other cards. This one of Kurumi is 7k base, but is effectively an 11k attacker, as she gets 4k power during our turn if we have 2 or more other characters. Her alarm can also be very helpful in certain situations. At the start of your Climax phase, if she's on top of clock, you can choose one of your characters to gain the following ability until the end of turn. When this card's battle opponent is reversed, you can send it to stock, then put the bottom card of the opponent's stock into waiting room. If you watched our recent Quintessential Quintuplets meta deck profile, you know that this card functions in a very similar way to the level 0 Itsuki, and has basically the same applications. The stock kick serves as hard removal to avoid on-death abilities that require going to memory or clock as costs, and can remove characters with Encore from the board permanently. Additionally, this ability might incidentally push a Climax further down in your opponent's stock, making them have to pay more if they want to clean it out. The last level 2s we run are 2 copies of the Free Fresh counter, which can be very easily picked up off choice triggers. If you trigger too many choices, you can pick up the Kurumi Free Fresh and then use it to pay out the triggered Climaxes and get your deck back into a safer ratio. Also, in most cases, I do not recommend picking up Free Fresh Kurumi off of the first choice Climax you trigger, especially if it's your first trigger of the turn. The reason is because of the potential position in stock that your Climaxes might end up. For example, let's say you trigger 2 choice Climaxes in a single turn, one on the first attack and one on the third attack. If you chose to get stock on the first choice trigger and salvage the Free Fresh on the second one, this gives you the option to Free Fresh and pay out both Climaxes at the same time. However, if you change the order of these selections, salvaging Free Fresh on the first choice and getting a stock on the second, your stock now looks like this. And you can no longer pay out both choice Climaxes by using just the Free Fresh counter. This sort of situation doesn't only apply if you trigger choice on the first attack, nor does the situation need to even include the Free Fresh counter. For example, let's say you trigger choices on the second and third attacks. Choosing stock then salvage in that order gives you the freedom to pay only 2 stock on your next turn to pay out both Climaxes, whereas choosing salvage then stock means that you have to pay 3 stock in order to get the same result. Moving on to the level 3s, we have our all-important early play Kurumi. She has a 4 or more early play condition, but not in the usual sense. She needs to be summoned from on top of clock as an alarm while you have 4 or more Date or Celestial Spirit characters already on stage, and when summoned this way, put the top card of your deck into clock. When she's placed on stage, either directly from hand at level 3 or via her alarm ability, you heal 1, and power-wise, she gets to 10-5 power if you have 2 characters in your back row. As these 2 back row characters will pretty much always be the 1-0 Kurumi plus either the 0-0 or 2-1 supports, Kurumi's most likely power levels will be either at 11,500 or 13,000, depending on whether or not you've developed a 2-1 support already. Her alarm condition can be fulfilled in multiple different ways. Obviously, the most basic way is to just clock her from hand during her clock phase, as this immediately sets her up on top. The 2-1 Kurumi can use her ability to immediately put a 3-2 Kurumi on top of your clock from your waiting room as well. The level 0 Kurumi cannot put her directly on top of clock because she sends cards to the bottom, but if you already have a Kurumi somewhere in the middle of your clock, you can use the 0-0's ability to send 2 characters from clock to memory temporarily, and now the 3-2 is on top, ready to be early played. You can also use the 1-0 Resonance Kurumi to take an early play out of clock, and then immediately put it back on top. If you have an early play in hand, your 1-0 support can also pull some other card out of clock, and then put the early play from hand on top of clock, setting up the alarm. It's also possible to go for double early play turns. Typically, when the early play condition requires 4 or more characters on board, it's not realistic to try going for more than 1 since it would mean playing over one of your characters. However, if one of those characters is a Sawa or Shido, you can use their ability, removing them from the board to get a card back in hand, and now you have an empty slot to comfortably play a second early play. This does require 5 stock though, 4 for the early plays and 1 for the Sawa or Shido, but it's well worth it considering the amount of power and board control this will give you moving forward. Alternatively, you can sack a 1-0 Kurumi to clear up a board slot, which will result in a -1 compared to the Sawa or Shido, but costs 1 less stock and will give you extra 2k power as well as the free mill from her on death ability, potentially also grabbing a needed climax along the way. Our last card in the deck is our 3-2 Kurumi and Hibiki, which has the all-important stock swap ability, very useful for combating well-compressed decks. It's nowhere near as flashy as many of the other cards in our deck, but it's still a very important profile. Alternatively, you could run the 3-2 Kurumi RR from Date Alive with her Michiru 5 ability. It serves a similar role to Stock Swap in that it rips cards out of your opponent's deck, but is also a healer and can help contribute to a finisher turn by dealing extra damage. Now let's talk about the deck's game flow and strategy. In your mulligan, as with any deck running choice climaxes, you will want to discard cards with soul triggers so that you have targets in your waiting room if you trigger an early choice climax. Prioritize the Kurumi Riki, level 0 and level 1 Kurumi back rows, level 1 Kotori combos and her climax, and 1 copy of Zafkiel Kurumi to use for resonance. Even though the 1-0 Kurumi back row can search a Zafkiel Kurumi using her on-play effect, you can just use that extra copy to swap into clock with the resonance and grab something else. Lastly, if you don't already have the climax for Kotori's level 1 combo, consider also holding onto the 1-0 Kurumi to get extra chances at the climax with her on-death dig ability. At level 1, you want to use Kotori combos to generate lots of hand, while using cards like Sawa, Shido, the My Little Shido event, and your Backrow Setup to sculpt for your mid-game. Cards you're looking to play at level 2 are the 2-1 assist and copies of your 3-2 Kurumi early play. You can also consider fishing for the level 0 alarm so that you can try to orchestrate a play where it ends up on top of your clock, and you can use the 2k buff ability to protect your early plays. At level 3, you will usually want to attack with the Kurumi combos as late as possible into your attack phase, since their variable burn gives you a lot of flexibility, and you will want to inflict soul damage first, which is random based on your trigger, before you use your burn ability, which is a guaranteed amount of damage. You can use the 0-0 or 2-1 supports to add cards into your clock with levels that you don't already have, to add more options on the burn, something that I like to refer to as loading the bullets in the gun. One more notable trick that you can do at level 3 is using the 0-0 Kurumi support to take cards out of your clock and send them to memory, which can sometimes save your life if you're at 3-6 with very little deck left, especially considering the level 3 Kurumi combo does not immediately heal on play. And now for some cards that I chose not to play. First, let's address the lack of on-play utility cards in this deck, such as drop searchers and drop salvagers. The idea behind not including any of these in the list basically goes back to our Backrow package. The combination of the 0-0 or 2-1 supports, combined with the level 1 resonance, gives us free access to any character in our waiting room, so I felt that running on-play utility was not only redundant, but also more expensive as those profiles cost stock. Another card I chose not to run in my list is the 1-0 shift counter. This is a card choice that June runs in his version of the deck, which you guys will see in an upcoming gameplay video. The idea behind running this card is that it gives you more options when you clock this card from hand during your clock phase, since it can use its shift ability to swap with a card in hand after you've drawn 2 and can assess your options. It can only swap with a yellow card in hand, but since 90% of this deck is yellow, that should never be a problem. I've elected to not include this card in my build in order to make room for more level 0s. Even at its current 15 level 0s, that's quite low for my taste, but June's list is even greedier, running even less level 0s than that. And that wraps it up for our Data Bullet 8-choice deck profile. I know it was a lot to take in, but I really hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile as well as learned a thing or two, as it is truly a different experience playing this deck compared to your average Weiss deck. Let us know down in the comment section if you guys have any questions, and look forward to our gameplay matches with Data Bullet in the upcoming videos. We've got some truly amazing games lined up for you guys, and you're not going to want to miss a single one, so hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for all the action. This has been Randall, aka Shizukatz, on the Tressa's Collectibles channel, and until next time, see ya!